honoured to be in the presence of BJ Thomas. BJ, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us for this, and you've had such an amazing career. But I wanted to start by asking you the same question that I always kick off these interviews with, which is, what made you want to become a musician?
Well, I think it was, I grew up with music. My dad was a big fan of country music. He loved Hank Williams and all those Grand Ole Opry guys, and so I just grew up. And my dad loved to have a good time, and he loved the music, and he probably could have been a musician himself, but he was just a working man. But that's how I got into it. And when I was about 12 or 13, I started hearing. I kind of was a product of top 40 radio, and I heard Jackie Wilson's first records, "To Be Loved," and those songs, and it just it really opened my mind to how emotional and what feelings there were in music. And it just so happened I had me and three of my friends. We were all 15 years old, and we got a little band together, and it just went from there.
Wow!
I didn't know what I was getting into, but. And by the way, thank you for including me in this, and I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time, because we know you still play a lot of shows at the moment.
Yeah, I don't go out for long periods of time, but I'll do maybe 60, 70 shows a year. So.
Well, I mean
that keeps me busy.
That's a hell of a lot. What I was going to say is, so you mentioned Jackie Wilson.
Yes.
But what other early influences would you say kind of got you started?
Well, of course, I really got into Hank Williams, because my dad loved Hank Williams, and also Ernest Tubb. I don't know if you've ever heard of Ernest Tubb, but he was one of the greats, and he was responsible for discovering Hank. But so I got into those guys, and I love that music. And of course, I liked Hank Williams' music, but it just really didn't give me that burning desire to get involved until I started hearing that. We had our music was the best, we feel like, back then, and the guys that were doing it the best were the African American artists. And so when I got into, I became a kind of a friend with Bobby Bland, and of course I was influenced by Jackie Wilson and James Brown. And my first gig out of Houston, when I had my first hit record, I was booked out on the James Brown tour, because they thought I was an African American guy, and so they booked me out with James, and I worked with James, and I worked with Jackie Wilson, and I was around Bobby quite a bit, and so it was one of those things. When I first started doing it, I didn't really know, what was going to happen, but it really just it really lit me up on that inside, and I had that burning desire to do it, and that's why I'm still doing it, even though I'm older. But you didn't notice that.
No, I didn't. You're looking in fine fettle.
Oh.
So you started your first band when you were a teenager?
Yeah, we were 15 years old. Yeah.
And what was the name of that band?
The Triumphs.
Triumphs.
And they're still together, and I haven't worked with them in a few years, but we'll do like maybe a benefit or a charity show, maybe once or twice a year. Every now and then we can get together. I'm
That's
not
amazing.
sure they're still working that much anymore now, but yeah, a great bunch of guys, and we just copy those songs off the top 40 chart, and do that, and we worked out in the boondocks, a little town west of Houston, Texas, where I grew up, and the teenagers would come out on the weekend, and we would play 4 hours, and it was just the greatest. I mean, it might have been the best time of my entire career before I even had hit records. It's what I go back and remember quite often.
So that early gigging experience. And how many years were you gigging?
Well, I was beginning to think, man, you're getting older here. You need to have your hit record. I mean, Elvis had one at 19, and I was 22 when I had my first hit record. So I was with the band 7 or 8 years, and it was a great way. It was like being in school. It was like being in music school, and it was a great way for you to get to where you can do what you the thing that you want to do is you have that experience of working with a band, and you got a few years to kind of goof up and whatever, and find your way and find your style. And I always, even when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, we happened to live by a church, and so my brother and I, my brother Jerry and I, we would go to the church. And the one thing that turned me on about the church, aside from the other young people that we wanted to hang with, was the gospel music, the spiritual music. And even then, I always had a little thing I was doing, and I don't know where it came from, but a little thing now that is part of my style, I guess, or whatever. But an emotional thing that I would feel in the gospel music, and would make me get off the melody and do other things, which I guess I've always done. But that was a big basis for me too, the gospel music of church.
And you've of course had quite a lot of Christian records as well as pop records.
Yeah, I did. I had a spiritual experience that my wife Gloria and I had, that kind of turned our life around. We kind of woke up to what was real, and not that I'm not a religious guy, and I'm not all that spiritual, but I had that moment years ago, my wife and I, and
was that in the mid-70s?
Yeah, it was. It was in the mid-70s, and so there was a gospel label down in Texas, and they came to me and they had heard about whatever. I don't know how they heard about it, but they said, "Would you make a gospel record?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And so we made the gospel record, and it became the first platinum album in gospel history, and won a few Grammys, and that was very successful, and we had a great experience there. But I had 5 albums there that went really well, and I still do a gospel thing or two in my show. But I just found that being a quote Christian artist or a gospel artist just didn't fit me really well, and I missed the other music, and
so it's just a part of what you do, it's not really
it's just a part. It's just an expression of I don't know, gospel music, spiritual music can move you in a certain way sometimes. You don't necessarily have to be religious about it, but it has a feeling to it. So that's what I loved about it. But I didn't want to be a minister or anything. And a lot of people, even now, think that I'm a minister, and because of that music, and I appreciate it. I mean, they respect that involvement. But I had a success there, and a great time.
And you can tell the influence of gospel on your singing style for sure. Despite all the other amazing things that you've done in your career. And when did you first realize, you had that experience gigging, and you hadn't had a hit yet?
No.
Did you have like a burning ambition to be successful? And get that hit record? That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, we just, that was our desire, our big dream was to have a hit record. And of course, we knew that we were never going to, but that's what we aspired to do. And I remember one time I was home with my mom was saying, "How'd the dance go?" or whatever. And I said, "Well, it's pretty good." And I said, "Mom, what do you think if I have a hit record maybe?" And boy, we both just got embarrassed just to even idea of thinking that I would have a hit record. We couldn't even talk about it. But, it kind of came out of nowhere. We got the chance to make our first album. And so we cut the album one night, did the entire album. It was about 5:30 in the morning.
And what studio was that?
It was in Pasadena, Texas. Maybe it was Gold Star. I don't remember the exact.
In one night? Yeah,
we cut the whole thing one night. That's all the time we had. Hey, we'll give you this. You cut the songs, but you got to do them tonight. So we said okay, and some of them, some of them didn't come off that well because I was getting worn out. But about 5:30 in the morning, when everybody just wanted to pack up and leave, and I said, "Hey, man, we forgot that one song." And my dad had asked me when I left for the studio. He said, "Please do a country song." And I said, "Well, Dad, yeah, I'll try to." So I said, "We got to do that song for my dad." And we'd been doing "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry," the old Hank Williams song, for a few months at our dances, and it had kind of evolved into, our version of how we were doing it. So we cut it. We went to the trumpet player's lip was, swollen and everything. So the first take, I think it was the third take. The first take we got through that he didn't miss his note. We took that, and okay, put that one on. And so we put it on the B side of some song that we thought was a hit record, and it found its way on the radio. I mean, at that time that could happen. A good song could find its way. Nowadays, maybe it's a little different. Maybe some music can get lost, but
Sure.
it found its way on the radio, and started selling. But it became a #1 record in Houston, Texas, in 3 weeks, and my first gig, they booked me out. I started in Oklahoma with that the Triumphs didn't want to go. I said, hey man, they want us to play with James Brown, and we're going to go. And they said, no, we don't want to go. And
why not?
I don't know. I mean, they worked for their dads, and they had couple of guys were going to college, and I didn't have that hang up. So I said, well, and this also happened with the Dick Clark tour. They booked me, and they wanted the band, but the band wouldn't go. And so, but I said, well, I'm going, And so they said, okay. So I put another little band together, and we went out and worked with James Brown. And he kind of took to us. I think he had mercy on us. And when we did the first sound check, he could see that we didn't know what we were doing. And
James Brown.
Yeah.
Took mercy on you. He was meant to be a very,
Well, he had his reputation as being kind of tough, and his audience.
Sounds like he wasn't like that though.
I don't know exactly what his personal life was, but the way he was with us, he was a real pro, and he kind of took to us. And the first night I went on, I was standing by the stage, and man, I mean, I'm shaking, and he says, he came out, all of a sudden he was standing by me, and he said, give me the mic. And I gave him the mic, and he went on stage, and he said, look, I met BJ this afternoon. He seemed like a good guy, a good kid, He said, so I want you to treat him right, So then he came off, and he gave me the mic. So
wow.
I went on, and I'm sure they would have booed me off like they did many people, but they loved I'm So Lonesome, and not much reaction to anything else, but they treated me nice. And I was with his tour for about 5 days. Then I went up and worked with Jackie Wilson and Johnny Mathis, and I had a great experience there. And then eventually I ended up on the Dick Clark tour, and that really got me going.
So was that a big kind of turning point in getting further momentum?
Yeah, that first hit was that was the big hurdle there. It's like, man, because we didn't know what a hit sounded like, and we were just a band, and we were just doing the best we could, but we didn't have any idea.
Do you remember the first time you heard yourself on the radio?
Absolutely, yeah. I was driving down the freeway in this old beat up car I had, and I came on the radio, and man, it was quite. I didn't even recognize myself at first. Oh God, that's me. So it was really quite a feeling, and it's something I got used to. Thank God I can say that. But that first few times was really great.
And how did you push on from there?
Well, I had a little follow-up hit to Lonesome. But Lonesome was a million seller and a top 10 record, and then I had a thing called Mama. One of my best friends was a songwriter, and he wrote a song for my mom, and so I recorded that, and that did fairly well. It was went to 22 on the chart or what. And so I was kind of rolling, but then I had been on the road so much that I neglected to, I didn't know what I was doing, and I kind of neglected to get in the studio and make sure I had some music. And so I was just kind of sitting in Houston, not doing anything. And my buddy, Mark James, who wrote Hooked on a Feeling for me and Eyes of a New York Woman, wrote Suspicious Minds, was in Memphis at that time, 67. And he called me and said, BJ, what are you doing? I said, man, I'm not doing anything, He said, well, you need to come up to Memphis. He said, man, they're cutting hit records on everybody, and they've got a lot of songwriters. And he said, they're cutting my songs. And he said, you need to come up. So I said, okay. So we went up, And I sang with the American Studio Group. I'm sure you've heard of them, Chips Moman and the American Studio, and that Reggie Young was their guitar player, and he eventually became the most recorded guitar player of all time.
Wow.
So that's how many hit records they were on and how much they recorded. They cut hit records on Dusty Springfield and just Elvis, of course, and lots of people. So I went and sang with the band, and it was like they were my band, and I was their singer. We just fit together so perfectly. And so Chips said, "BJ, will you move up? You move to Memphis." And he said, "That way, when I get a song that I think fits you and would be a hit on you, I can call you. You can come in, record it, and we can get it right out." So that sounded good to me, and so we moved up to Memphis, and that's how it worked. He got Mark James wrote me a song, and it was like a top 20 record, and then he wrote "Hooked on a Feeling" for me, and that really got me going, and then that was responsible for a lot of other records that I've cut. And I got the notice of. I've been very lucky in my career. I've worked with some of the great composers and songwriters of all time.
Of course.
So, and do you want to hear an Elvis story?
I mean, it's been amazing to speak with someone who had such a friendship with Elvis.
Well, I wasn't a close friend, and I kind of made sure that I didn't get collected, and get in a situation where I had to dance to the tune all the time. But I did. I was around him a few times, and I sang at a couple of parties, Christmas party and a Valentine's party. And I think he kind of liked me because I had the song "Mama," and of course it's legendary how we all love our mothers, but he had that great relationship with Gladys, his mom, and so he liked me somewhat, and I was around him a number of times, and he was a wonderful, beautiful guy. And anyway, that when we moved up, we had a trailer full of our stuff, and when we got to Memphis, my brother said, he said, let's go see Elvis. And so I said, yeah, okay, cool. So he knew where he lived, and we drove over to Graceland. As a matter of fact, I don't know how we knew where he lived, but anyway, we found Graceland. And the gates were open and everything, so we drove right in up to the front door, and there was a security guard there came out on the porch of the house, and he said, "Can I help you, boys?" And we said, "Yes, sir. We want to see Elvis." And he said, "Well, he's out there in that Hollywood," but he said, "Would you like to come in the house and look around?" And we said, "Yeah, you bet." So we went in and we looked all around the house, and I guess it was his grandmother was in the kitchen, and she said, "Would you like a sandwich?" We said, "No, we're fine. We're fine." And so after a while, we looked around. And we said, we want to go up and see Elvis's bedroom." And he said, "No." He said, "No one can go upstairs." But that was quite an experience. And then we went, of course, to our little place we had rented and started recording. And eventually, Elvis did come in. And I think, he covered a few of my records over the years. And so I think, I was a little bit of an influence for him to come in and check American Studio out. Of course, he came in and cut some of the best music of his career. So.
His comeback records.
Yeah.
That's a really incredible story, and what a great thing to do to move to Memphis and start pushing on with your career at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it took a little. We were a little. I guess maybe we were too dumb to be afraid to do it. But there was no way. Once he invited me to Memphis, and the way I had kind of gelled with the band, and they loved the way I sang, and I think I motivated them, and they motivated me. So I was definitely going up. There was nothing going to keep me back, and that's some of the best, most beautiful experiences I've had in my career. Because they were laid back. It was a comfortable thing, and they were cutting hit records on everyone, and of course when I did "Hooked on a Feeling," that kind of led to me getting in Burt Bacharach's mind, and kind of led to me doing Raindrops. Of course, Steve Tyrell had a lot of responsibility for that. He was working with Scepter Records at that time, the little label I was on, and he helped Bacharach pick me for Raindrops. So it all worked out beautifully.
And one thing that's, because you had a lot of hits, and then Hooked on a Feeling and Raindrops were really kind of, they've over time they've just taken on a life of their own and become, you know, two of the most loved songs of all time. Does it ever annoy you how huge they are in comparison with the rest of your catalogue? I mean, the rest of everybody else's catalogues. I mean, they're two of the biggest songs of all time.
Well, you know, I've learned to when I finish recording, I let it go. I don't worry about it, and it's going to do what it does. But back then, you know, I was, everything in me was wanting these songs to be successful, and Hooked on a Feeling was a very difficult song to get airplay. You know, they just wouldn't, no one would play it. I think the sitar.
Why was that?
I think it was the sitar thing, and you know, it was something kind of different, and it took you know, a couple of months just to get a station to go on it and play it. But once they started playing it, it became a big record, and led to the Raindrops. And I don't have any negative feelings about one song being bigger than the other. Hey, I hope they're all bigger than the other.
Yeah. And do you ever get tired of singing them?
No, you know, I have my peers. You know, a lot of guys I know, they say, man, you know, I don't even do that song anymore. I go, man, you know, what? Are you crazy? I'm tired of it, they say. But, you know, I never had that experience. Some of my songs, of course, some of the early ones, I think, well, they're kind of dated. But, you know, I still like to do them because I'm just like anyone else. I have a lot of memories and experiences tied to those songs that come back to me when I perform them and when I do them. So I never have any problems performing and singing them. I love it. You know.
That's what you want to hear, and it's really, because I guess people are coming to your shows and they want to hear those songs.
Yeah, they want to hear those songs. They want to hear them like note for note the way they were, and you know, that doesn't bother me. I like to do them exactly as I recorded them, and that's the way that people want to hear it. You know, I don't want to make a new version out of. I mean, I wouldn't touch a note of Hooked on a Feeling. I'm going to do it just like it is.
Yeah.
So you know, it's been a great experience for me. I mean, some people might say, oh, it's an oldies show or whatever. I just don't look at it. I don't look at it like that. That's the music people know me by. So, you know, that's what they want to hear, and you know.
Well, it's timeless. It's not oldies.
Yeah. Hey, I don't have any problem. I never understood Zeppelin not going on the road because they didn't want to do their old stuff. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, that's a.
Yeah. I mean, hey, it's a shame.
I mean, they should have been traveling for years. Exactly, you know.
And when you first cut Raindrops, when you finished your vocal take, did you think, you know, this is going to be one of the biggest songs of all time?
I did, you know, and I didn't. You don't have that feeling about all the songs. You're kind of hoping, but.
I mean, given the writers.
Yeah. Well, you know, we'd done a couple of versions. I flew to California and rehearsed with Mr. Bacharach. We did the bicycle scene, which was very different from the single record that was a #1 record. You know, it was just like a banjo kind of thing. Paul Newman's on the bicycle and that kind of thing. And I had laryngitis at the time. I had done 3 weeks of one-nighters in the Midwest, and by the time I got out there, I could hardly talk. And I went to the doctor. He said, you know, BJ, he said, I don't want you to even speak for 2 weeks. I said, man, you got to help me, doc, because I had rehearsal that day, and I had the session on a Sunday for the movie. And anyway, he gave me a B12 shot or whatever, and I did get through a few takes. And Bacharach liked it. He liked the way it sounded. He thought it sounded like a cowboy, and you know, he didn't have any problems with it. But we did re-record. We re-recorded Raindrops in New York at Columbia Studios about 6 weeks later, and you know, that was the hit version. We only did it 3 times, which today is unusual because, you know, they go in, they'll cut something 30 times because they want to get it perfect. But we did it 3 times, and on the 3rd take, but you know, it was okay. This is the 3rd take. So when we got to the end. And Bacharach had told me, and I'd asked him, can I do my thing on this song? He said, you know, after you've sung every note exactly as I've written it, he said, if you got room to do your thing, you can do it, you know. So when I got to that last word, with the me thing, I kind of did that Buddy Holly thing on it, and you know, I'm not sure he liked it at first, but he got used to it, and he put the 3 takes together. The first take was the first verse, and then the second take was the second verse, and so on. So he knew what he was doing, and he was an awesome guy, and I so love that guy, and you know, one of the greatest composers of all time. And of course, Hal David was a huge part of that Bacharach music, because his lyrics were probably the best Bacharach ever wrote to. But
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, great. And I just
incredible lyric on that song as well.
Yeah, you know, it sounds. Of course, I had many conversations with Hal David about that song, and you know, he said they asked him to do a frivolous, silly song, and he said, you know, BJ, I don't write silly lyrics, you know, but they seem kind of offhand, but you know, when you go a little deeper with that song, it really has a truism to it that, hey, we're okay as long as we're free. So they were a wonderful set of lyrics, and I was very fortunate to, you know, get the chance to do that song.
They're definitely one of the best lyrics that's ever been.
There's something about it that, yeah. I sang it on the Academy Award show, 1970. And of course, Burt won a couple of Oscars, and Hal won one, and they just put the song in the Grammy Hall of Fame. Myself and Burt and Hal. So it's been a wonderful experience for me, and I still get to do it all the time. So it's all good.
But that wasn't really the end of your run of huge hits, though.
No,
you kept on pushing, and in fact, is it true that
I'm still pushing?
You have the distinction of the lengthiest title ever for a #1 hit record?
Oh yeah, for somebody done somebody wrong song. Hey, won't you play? Yeah, that was weird. I was recording with Chips and the American studio group. They're known as the Memphis Boys now, but in Nashville, and we'd cut the entire album, and so we listened to the whole thing back on the speakers, turned up real loud, and we listened to it. And Chip says, you know, B, I don't know if we have a hit record on this album. And I said, you know, I don't think we do. And the organ player, Bobby Emmons, said, Chips, play BJ that new song you just wrote. And I don't know if he was planning on doing it with somebody else or what, but he kind of face got red, and he didn't really want to do it. But eventually he played it to me, and it was Wrong Song, and it was just a natural fit for me. And it was Wrong Song was a #1 pop, #1 country, and you know, I still like singing that one too.
Yeah, it's a brilliant record. And you mentioned country music being such a kind of formative early influence for you musically. How did it feel to then have so many hit records on the country charts?
Yeah.
Which was that sort of mid to late 70s?
It was
really
kind of it was you know, right at the late 70s. You know, that was kind of after Wrong Song, I kind of hit bottom personally. You know, I had an alcohol problem. I was a drug addict and certain things, and so I kind of hit bottom professionally and personally. And so there were a number of years there that I didn't record. And then during those years is when I did the gospel thing. And then you know, when I decided to go back to to the music I'd always done, country had exploded and become a huge genre. And so some of my best friends were country people, Pete Drake and various people from Nashville. So we cut you know, Old Fashioned Love and various country songs, and we kind of purposely tried to do that. But you know, that didn't really fit that well either. I wanted to have the freedom to do whatever. So eventually, after a few successful country records, I did the theme song for a TV show called Growing Pains, a song called As Long As We've Got Each Other. And that was very successful for me. Yeah. Not necessarily in the record sales, but in airplay and on TV and various things around the world.
So you've had hits over such a huge number of years, but I would contend that, you know, you had big hit records during a time when there was so much amazing music being made. And you said earlier on that in today's world, a lot of the time music gets lost. What do you think of modern music?
Well, I got a lot of respect for all music, and it's all music is all about who's the next guy, who's the young guy, what's the next thing, So that's something I had to get used to, and it took me a while, when I, kind of stopped having these big records. I had to deal with it. It was kind of tough. But I kind of found my way in live, live music and touring and traveling and doing my music and people still want to hear it. They still come out and they want to hear me do it. So I've been very lucky there. But I had to deal with it. And music changed. It's become a lot maybe more technical. We've got the drum machine, we've got the click track, and all your favorite records, when you go back and listen to them, they have a little glitch or a little something in there. Somebody dropped a stick or they slowed down or they sped up or whatever. But now you don't hear that in music now because everything is perfectly in meter. So maybe there's a little something missing, but that's just inevitable.
It could come back round.
Well, I probably don't really dream that as often as I used to, but I still feel like I can sing with anybody, and I feel like I could have successful music. But now if I record now, I'm not necessarily recording for the radio because I know McCartney cuts records and what's his name, James Taylor cuts records. You don't hear them anywhere. But
they're just on the album charts.
They have huge records, #1 records. But so the radio is kind of out. But hey, I'm older now. I'm a little wiser. I'm a little more laid back about that.
Well, also you're playing an incredible number of shows, and
well, I've got a great band. My bass player's been with me 43 years, and so I love to go out and do my thing.
And have you been touring pretty much consistently every single year?
Yeah, I mean there have been the odd year every now and then when I'll work a little less. This year we've had some drama with my wife had open heart surgery, and so we cut back quite a bit. But no, it's been fairly consistent. Now I used to do 120, 150 shows, and then I did 100. And so now it's down at a little bit better number for me, and I can do it comfortably without I don't want to kill myself out there, but I don't want to stop doing it.
Well, it's extremely inspiring to see you working so hard and singing so well, and it's been a real pleasure to talk to you, BJ. I want to ask you one final question, which is, if we were selecting a list of greatest artists and musicians of all time, and for this you can name people who have passed away or are still with us, who would be some of your favourites of all time?
Well, I think Bobby Bland was the Sinatra of R&B music. Of course, you've got the obvious people, Marvin Gaye, and Jackie Wilson was the greatest for me. He's right there with Elvis. I mean, there's no denying that Elvis was the greatest recording artist and entertainer of all time. But there have been other singers who could pretty much get right there with him, like Jackie Wilson, and just there's a lot of wonderful guys out there that I still listen to. I mean, Eddie Kendricks with the Temptations was a wonderful singer. David Ruffin, also with the Temptations, and there'll only be one Elvis, and that's the way it ought to be. So Elvis is the man. But there's been a lot of great singers. Al Green.
I do agree. And surprisingly, and you might be amazed to learn this, this is probably, I think you're the 35th of the greatest of all time.
Are you kidding me?
Who we've interviewed, and
beautiful.
Not one person has mentioned Elvis so far when they've been asked that question. So I think it was
You know,
about time that happened.
It's too obvious, you know. It's like the way they put Muhammad Ali down. When if you go back and look at his fights, all of them were wonderful. But yeah, I mean, I think Elvis is obviously the greatest complete package of all time. But
and the first of that level as well.
yeah, the first guy to be that huge, and of course, like they say, everything that people are trying to do now, Elvis has already done, and that's pretty much so. But you know, I'm blown away about that because you know, I'm not sure any of us are that great. I mean, we're just making records. Not that pop records are easy to make, because I don't think. You know, I mean, Pavarotti was the greatest singer of all time for me, but I mean, he didn't have any pop hits, and they're hard to make by people that don't know what they're doing. So, you know.
And they help people. You know, they help people get through the day.
Absolutely, yeah. I think they're very, very important, and they're called pop music because they're popular. You know, because the population loves them. So I have no qualms or shame about being in that genre, and.
It's the best genre.
It's the best, man.
That's why everybody likes it.
How do you get through your day without, you know, a Temptations record or a Marvin Gaye thing, you know? So.
Or a B.J. Thomas record.
Maybe so, yeah.
And actually, I forgot, there is, this is really the final question. So because of the fact that Raindrops and Hooked on a Feeling are so huge, I feel that it would be really good to hear from you. What are 2 tracks that are kind of more deep cuts?
Well, I recorded, I don't have to think about it too hard. I recorded a thing that Jimmy Webb wrote called A Song for My Brother. I'll let you talking about my stuff?
Yeah.
I think that's one song that I really, you know, I don't really perform it much live anymore, but that's maybe one of the most meaningful songs I've ever recorded. Gee, I don't know. You know, I think you could go to maybe a couple of my gospel things, and they may be important to you, but I don't know. It's hard to pick it out. I think my first hit, "I'm So Lonesome," I think it was maybe my favorite record a lot of the time.
Must be amazing memories from it.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I've been very fortunate, and the memories are really important.
Well, BJ, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate it.